And we are live with week 4 of the Gridiron Address. Finally back. I was out last week, but we're back this week with 2 great guests. First, let me introduce Mouthing Off with Mike. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I could be better if my Eagles would have actually played football today, because it looks like they forgot how to play. So doing well, can't complain. But yeah, a little sad on the Eagles front.
And next up, as you can see, Chris Deluca, host of Dugout Debrief, back again for a second time. Chris, how are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. The Steelers had a heartbreaker today, but we're going to elaborate a little bit more on that. I have a couple takes I have on that. It was tough. Both Pennsylvania teams, as Mouthing Off and Mike and I were talking about before, us Pennsylvania guys did not have the best week 4.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And real quick, technical issues. We are having trouble on Facebook, so we will only be on YouTube. I'm going to try and solve that problem real quick by just deleting it from Facebook so that it gets off my screen. I'm sorry if anyone was going to watch on Facebook, but I lack the capabilities to solve that problem. I am not super tech savvy. So
it's an ongoing problem, folks. Don't worry. Blame Mark Zuckerberg. It has nothing to do with the Boom broadcast. We're technically savvy for the most part. Blame Zuckerberg, blame Facebook. It's not on us. We're still live on YouTube. So the people will come. They'll find us.
Podcast Smitty Wash, appreciate you supporting the show, Shannon. And let's get it started out with Mike, your Eagles. Like you said before, they kind of just forgot how to play football. I mean, what are your thoughts after this game?
I mean, my thoughts are there's some serious growing pains with this team. I mean, let's put the obvious out there. We're down AJ Brown. We're down Devontae Smith. We're down the 2 weapons of Philadelphia. We've got Dallas Goedert. You've got Paris Campbell, John Ross, and Jahan Dotson, who I thought was going to be more involved in the game plan today. This was a tough one, man. The weather was terrible. Obviously, both teams played in that terrible humidity, in Florida, in Tampa Bay. But yeah, we got outclassed. We got outplayed very early on in this game. Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay ran us down in that first quarter, in that first half of the game. They controlled time of possession. They controlled the ball. They controlled the entire game. We got lucky on a couple things. The block field goal was pretty cool. Make it a 2-possession game. Give us a little hope. But turnovers come in, and the fact that there's just nobody there that could get open, just got outclassed. Just an absolute bad showing today.
And Chris, do you feel like it's too early to be concerned about Philly, or do you think that some cracks are starting to show that could be problematic in the long run?
I think it's too early to really give a full assumption, mainly because of the aforementioned injuries that we discussed. No AJ Brown, that was a big, huge thing. And overall, yes, it's a hard division. There are really going to be some hard matchups in the future. Washington looks really good. So I think in the end, it's going to come down to those division matchups. And if Philly can get healthy, they can go back to the Philly that we know and love. I do think that there are signs of concern, but I don't think that this is the end-all, be-all. Similar, again, to which we'll talk about later in the program, the Steelers, too. I don't think it's an end-all, be-all, but there are signs of concern.
And this will be for both of y'all. Mike, you can go first with this question. How much better do you think Philly is going to look once they're at full strength with a healthy AJ Brown and a healthy Devontae Smith?
I mean, the positive Philly fan in me wants to say they'll look substantially better, but it's tough to say. It's too early on. I mean, there's clearly something going on with the offensive play calling when it comes to Sirianni and Moore. And obviously with Hurts, he doesn't look the same, and he's making mistakes that I would have felt that he would have made earlier on in his career. And he's making those kind of silly mistakes, now. So a little confusing. I'd like to think that when they come back that, this is a way better team on offense. But as for the defense today, 13 missed tackles, if I remember seeing correctly, that's tough. You can't let plays like that. And silly penalties killed us today. That's another thing. So I think get them guys back, and we could have a better conversation and kind of see if they still look like this with those two back. Then we got to have a whole different other conversation then.
And yeah, I basically kind of have the same opinion. I think that, at least I hope that once these receivers are back healthy, they'll be able to. But similar to what you said with Jalen Hurts, is he does not look himself. He's making mistakes that he should not be making at this point in his career. And that's really big because he has to be an improviser. I mean, that's the thing. People are going to get injured. You still have pieces. You still had Jahan Dotson. You still had Dallas Goedert. And a wide receiver should not make or break the game in 2024, if you ask me. Jalen Hurts is a great improviser, again, but he today was not a great improviser. And that is the one of the signs of concern that I do have with you guys.
Good point.
And
yeah, I mean, it's true.
And to finish up this Eagles recap, what do y'all think is to blame for this shaky start to the season for the Eagles? Because every game they've had so far feels like it's been uncomfortably close almost.
I mean, before the Devontae Smith injury, and now I can kind of use the injury thing as my scapegoat. I would say podcast me the ghost of Tua. I would say looking at it, with the close game with Green Bay, the close game with Atlanta that we lost, the close game with New Orleans that we won, and then today just getting absolutely dominated. Before this weekend, without the injuries, I'd say you got to place the blame on Sirianni and bad coaching calls. You gotta kick field goals when you're in field goal range in close games. You gotta put points on the board. I understand we want to live and die on the gamble, but I would say it has to do a little bit with the coaching, and I think a little bit right now with the injuries.
I agree with him too. I mean, I agree with Mike as well, because a lot of this also has to do with just playing against teams that were hot at that time in particular. I mean, New Orleans was really hot. Atlanta looked really good. They put up a great fight against Kansas City just recently. So it's a little bit of a bad luck of the draw, plus injuries, plus some just not great play call.
Yeah. And moving on to the next one, my Carolina Panthers lost a game that I really thought they could have pulled off. 34-24 loss to the Bengals. This team just looked sloppy. It felt like they were making stupid mistakes. Leggett had a ugly drop ball. Mingo on that fourth quarter drive, easy drop pass, hit him right in the chest. It just felt like they were every stupid, simple mistake they could make, it felt like they were making. Now, if to y'all, this will be for both of you, Chris, you'll go first. If this team cleans up these small little things, do you think that they could scrape together maybe 4 or 5 more wins this season?
I mean, I think they're capable of that. And the big thing now is, again, you guys just replaced a quarterback that you thought was going to be your future. And these guys are not prepared. These young guys, predominantly young guys, the aforementioned wide receivers especially, are not prepared for a veteran quarterback. They're not prepared under Andy Dalton's system. And that's the big issue I think they're running into. They look a lot better. Y'all won last week. You guys looked okay outside of the aforementioned mistakes. But I think it does say something that you guys could win a few games once Andy Dalton, if he remains the starter. That's up in the air. I assume he's going to. If he remains the starter, I think that you give him 2, 3, 4 weeks, they can clean it up and, string together a respectable season. Hey, maybe even 5 wins. I mean, I haven't looked at their schedule. I have to pull it up, but I think that you guys can pull it together. You look better overall is what the summary of what I'm saying.
Yeah, 100% with Chris. It's a way different looking team. I know, myself and Aaron were talking about it, before we went live. We were on Out of Pocket a couple months ago during the summer. We were talking about like the outlook for some of the teams, in particular Carolina, with Bryce Young at the helm. And I said, Carolina could be a sleepy team. Like they could be sneaky. They could, make some moves in this division. My only misjudged look was thinking that Bryce would be the quarterback with this team. And Andy came in last week, got a big win, kind of put the media and everybody's eyes back on Carolina, and raised the question about Bryce Young and his future with Carolina and maybe even in the NFL. So I think with Andy Dalton at the helm, I think anything's possible for this team. They have really good weapons on offense. You talked about Leggett. I'll talk about Deontay Johnson, and you got to talk about, obviously Thielen's hurt, but you got Thielen there too, the veteran wide receiver. So you've got the pieces, and if Dalton can play good and not make those classic Andy Dalton moves, you got a shot to win a couple more games. That's 100%. I think that's true.
For sure. And with Andy Dalton looking as good as he has looked through his 2 starts so far, are y'all at all concerned with Bryce Young's future in Carolina?
I mean, I am personally. I think that he's potentially going down a bad route. He's undersized. I mean, that's kind of the issue. And there are guys who can push through that, like Kyler Murray, not so much this week necessarily, but still be respectable quarterbacks. The big thing is you got to work with the athleticism. You got to work with him. And I think that if he's going to have a future in the NFL, it's probably not going to be with Carolina, because I'm starting to wonder if that front office has kind of given up on him, unfortunately. And I wish the best for him. I don't hate him personally. I don't wish bad on any athlete, really, except 1 or 2. I really don't. So
perfect.
Yeah, but still, I am concerned about his future with the Panthers. But if he can go to a system that can make it work, then maybe he can improve. But again, we would have to see where he could go. We have to see how free agency goes next year. I think that he's done this year, though, personally.
I think Bryce, well, here's the problem. You got an Andy Dalton. How old is Andy Dalton? Like 30-something years old, 40-something years old, almost 40-something years old?
Mid-30s, yeah.
Mid-30s. All right. So you could argue, maybe he's got a couple more years left in the tank. If we got Joe Flacco out here, in Indianapolis winning games against Chris's poor Steelers, then I think you could say Dalton could have a couple more years left in the tank. I mean, if Rodgers is out there hobbling along, anything's possible in the NFL.
He hobbled his way right into a loss, though.
Hobbled his way right into a loss. First of all, that was a baseball game score. I know Chris loves that. That was a 10-9 game that they lost in a rainy MetLife Stadium, and Rodgers got sacked 5 times. So forget about it. Bryce Young, though, I think he's stuck in Carolina for a bit. I think he's going to ride that bench for the rest of this year. He's going to learn from Andy Dalton, quote unquote. And then I think next year you assess the situation. What do you want to do with them? If someone offers you options, player pieces, something, then maybe you're inclined to get rid of them. But you put all that stock in this guy, with your draft capital, even to the point where you ruin future draft capital for this guy. So that's the old regime. Does the new regime say, hey, you know what? Let's cut our losses, put Darnold out there for a year, see where we go, and see what our draft capital is coming down the pipeline in 26 or 27, or Bryce Young rides the bench, maybe learns some things. Maybe he's a different player. It's so early. Like, it's only his second year in the NFL, and I think it's a tough thing. Look at a Sam Darnold. Look at a Geno Smith. Guys that started under pretty ass organizations, the Jets, right? And now look at them. They finally found their homes and they found their way. So anything's possible. You just get a what was the coach of Minnesota was on record this week saying? We give some of these rookies, we give them a hard time because it's not them, it's just a bad organization. Could be.
Yeah, Geno, West Virginia guy, man, he really bounced it back, and I'm so happy to see him, have success in the NFL. He's become one of our most successful NFL products at this point, if I'm being honest with you, and I love it. I love watching. I'm not a Seahawks fan personally, but I always make sure I tune into a Seahawks game just to see, fellow Mountaineer alumni.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. That's how I feel about Jaden Daniels in Washington, because he's a former Sun Devil. So I saw him playing my last year of college, and I thought we were going to be doing big things with a Herm Edwards offense, and half the guys we had, some of them ended up in the NFL. Ayuk, Jaden Daniels, Ricky Purcell. There's a couple names on the defense side that are slipping, but I'm always rooting for Jaden Daniels, even if he's in my division with the Commanders destroying the Cardinals today.
Did you see the clip of when they were cleaning out his locker at Arizona State and they were calling him trash?
Piss me off, dude, to this day. Yeah, that's a little bit of a dark time in ASU's time, because there was that whole recruitment drama that came out, and ended up Herm left, and then Antonio Pierce left and found a job in the NFL too. So there's a few connections there that I really like seeing in the NFL that I'm glad we're able to rebound.
Moving on to the Steelers game, we've touched on it briefly so far, but they almost came back. They almost did it. It was looking rough for a bit. Anthony Richardson went down early, and the Steelers lose to Joe Flacco, 39-year-old Joe Flacco, in the year 2024. Chris, what are your thoughts on this as the resident Steelers fan?
So I have a lot of them, if I'm being honest with you. I dropped a couple on my TikTok, Chris.3623. And overall, the offense was lethargic in the first half. Once again, we could not get the ball to our playmakers in the first half, especially. We started to toward the end. Pickens ended up with over 100 yards. Najee Harris, who unfortunately had that very boneheaded decision at the end of the game to not get out of bounds. And overall, I don't understand it because Justin Fields is carrying us. And overall, we're just a boring team. Long-term wise, and I'll just touch on this now, there's still a few winnable games. We have Cincinnati twice, a week Cincinnati, a week Cleveland twice. We have the Raiders, the Giants, and Washington. We'll probably lose to the Eagles, but who knows? We could upset Maldonado and Mike's team.
Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, them Eagles will lose. Them Eagles probably will lose or worse for me.
Well, we're very good at finding ways to lose this year. I think we both are. But overall, the season's not over. We could use some help from Buffalo tonight in Sunday Night Football. I'd love it if they could beat Baltimore and keep the AFC North weak. But to overall conclude this, there are two main takes I have, and these are on the end of the game. One, Minka Fitzpatrick in the third quarter, I believe that was called in a roughing the passer call. The aforementioned, I talked about this in my TikTok, and we shouldn't have been in that situation anyway. He was making a football play. Yes, he lowered his shoulder to the shoulder of the wide receiver. I can't remember which receiver it was. And he was trying to either knock the ball loose or make him step out of bounds with one, or either not have 2 feet in bounds, rather. That's what a secondary guy should do. That is normal. And then finally, overall, on the fourth down, we were 4th and 22. Najee Harris to knock it out of bounds, which was just, don't even get me started. I've already elaborated on that and how that frustrating that was. It happened. It happens. Those 2 yards weren't worth it. I do not understand why Mike Tomlin did not call a timeout there. You are the most senior head coach now that Bill Belichick retired. I completely respect Tomlin, and I want him to stay as long as he can. He's physically able, and he's only like 52 right now. But that timeout, we needed to call that timeout to get to. He wanted to have the timeout for a field goal. You have to convert on 4th down to make a field goal, Mike, and I just do not get it. That was just beyond me. If we would have called the timeout and we would have lost, whatever. But overall, those 2 boneheaded decisions by 1, the referee, and then 2, Tomlin, we shouldn't have been in that situation anyway. There are winnable games left, but we need to win every single one of them because I do not see us beating Baltimore both times. I think we lose both times. I think we lose to the Eagles. Dallas, I think we lose next week. It's going to be tough, and we might be heading towards another, Mike Tomlin classic of 1 game above 500 or, heaven forbid, even worse.
The Mike Tomlin special, the 1 game above 500, still could make the wild card second team, and one of the just win an absolute disgusting game or lose an even uglier game. That is how I feel when I watch Pittsburgh. When they win, I'm like, that was gross. When they lose, I was like, that was even disgusting. That was even worse. That team, they win some of the ugliest games and they lose some of the ugliest games because today they should have won. They should have 100% won this game against Indianapolis. You got shout out to Joe Flacco, man. I don't know what keeps this man coming back for just to come back when a team's quarterback goes down he's always in the right place at the right time too. It does not matter what team he's on. For whatever reason, the quarterback goes down and Joe Flacco comes in and wins a game. It happens everywhere. Happened in Cleveland, happened today in Indianapolis. I'm sure I'm forgetting another team where it happened in Philly once before. Like, The guy is the Jets. Come on now. He shows up everywhere. He's like Joe Hendry of football, man. He's just there when you need him there. Yeah, this is. I think Pittsburgh. I think you're selling them a little short. I think the defense. There needs to be a conversation. The defense, has looked good up to today. I think when you take this a lot, I think I got to praise Justin Fields here. Justin Fields really has been a bright spot, when you're looking at Pittsburgh and what he's been able to accomplish and win games and keep games close. But yeah, I think you're selling them short. I think they might pull something out, man. They always play them Ravens hard. So I wouldn't be shocked if they beat the Ravens one of those games. And I honestly, as an Eagles fan, I wouldn't be shocked if they were to upset us in a couple of weeks. But also the Cowboys. I think you're selling them a little short with them Cowboys. I mean, Cowboys almost lost to the Giants this week. If it wasn't for boneheaded decisions by, Danny Dimes, and Neighbors getting concussed, we could be having a different discussion here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And I do think that we are selling them short or I did sell them short in a sense, but again, you have to look at performance and the lethargic offense of the first half. Looking at us in the first half, we were incredibly weak. We were classic Steelers football where we just could not make it happen. And overall, like I said before, we have these electric playmakers now. It's not like before, the past few years where, we're under Matt Canada and we just, Roethlisberger's still there. And like I said, I love Roethlisberger. I don't love him as a person, obviously, but, as a player, we're not even going to get into that.
You got a quarterback who can move. That's what
yes. So someone who's competent now, because Roethlisberger the end of his career was completely incompetent, and personality wise, he was completely incompetent his entire life and still is.
Yeah. With the entire AFC North off to a slow start, outside of Pittsburgh, weirdly enough, Pittsburgh's top of the division right now. Who do you think has the best chance to win the division at this point in time?
Baltimore or us. Baltimore or Pittsburgh, I'd say at this point. Cincinnati does not look good. And Cleveland is Cleveland, and they deserve every single thing that they're getting. I've elaborated on that in other shows.
100%.
They deserve it, They deserve it for the certain signings that they've made recently. So they deserve all the hardship that they're dealing with. But overall, I'd say it's either Pittsburgh or Baltimore. And a lot of it depends on the game tonight, which we could use a little bit of help from Buffalo.
I think that's going to be an interesting game tonight. You want to ask me who wins that division? I think you got to look at Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and I know they're 1-3 right now, but them Bengals, you never know. If Joe Burrow somehow, if they find the real Joe Burrow, because I don't think that's the real Joe Burrow. The real Joe Burrow needs to stand up. I think we saw a little bit of that today with his blonde hair, doing his best Slim Shady impersonation. I think those three teams, I think Cleveland is just for the dogs, pun intended.
I agree.
And I feel like this Cincinnati team at 1-3 has to be one of the most dangerous 1-3 teams we've seen. It's shocking that they're that bad. I would have expected them and Pittsburgh to be flopped, in all honesty. Because Cincinnati's had a pretty easy start to the season. I would have expected them to be sitting at 3-1, maybe 4-0. So I wouldn't be super shocked if they pulled it out, because Pittsburgh's got a tricky schedule coming up and their offense is incredibly stagnant, and that's not going to win them enough games. So that'll be an interesting division to keep our eyes on. But what we're going to do now, this is only the second time that we've had a full panel of guests, because a couple weeks ago it was just me and Chris. So we are going to rapid fire hit on some questions about earlier games that we didn't get more in depth of. I will be asking Mike or Chris the question. They'll give their answer, and then I'll bounce on to a separate question for the other person so we can try and hit on more games without going into too much depth, so we can still keep ourselves in our time limit and we can all get off and watch the night game. No worries at all. First question for Chris. Texans win a super close game against Jacksonville. Are you at all concerned with this Houston team having these super close games against bad teams like Chicago and Jacksonville?
Yes, I am. I mean, I'm very concerned because of all the weapons that they have. I mean, Tank Dell is out today, but still, they have an incredibly deep receiving core. CJ Stroud is amazing. The defense has improved. I know Laramie Tunsil went down. I don't know if he stayed out. I'd have to check that. But still, they have a lot of pieces. Their offensive line is much improved of the past. They have a great head coach. And the thing is that division is very, very winnable. I think they're still going to win the division, but I am concerned because similar to the Steelers, you are holding winnable games. You have your winnable games now because not all games are going to be winnable, and you should be dominating those winnable games. So yes, I am concerned about the Texans, and I do wish them the best too. I'm very, very, I really do like them. They're really fun to watch. So, yeah.
And Mike, for you, this is an NFC East related question. Washington put up 42 points in their victory over the Cardinals, sitting at the top of the NFC East at 3-1. Eagles and Cowboys right behind them at 2-2. Which NFC East team do you think has the best chance to win the division?
I think if Washington keeps playing the way they're playing and Jaden Daniels keeps putting them in positions to win games, I think it's Washington. And that's obviously that's going to shock a lot of people, especially my fellow Eagle fans. But I think that Jaden Daniels, man, I've said it for years. He's a special kind of player. And I think he's got the right system. He's one of the rookies this year that came into the right system for his talents, and he is excelling. That's a team you got to watch out for. If they can keep this momentum, that's a force to be reckoned in this NFC East.
Chris, the Chargers give up 17 unanswered and lose to the Chiefs today. What do you think is the current outlook for this Chargers team?
Well, the Chargers, I think, are going to struggle. They really don't have a lot of pieces. Today was a big opportunity to beat a contender, a true Super Bowl champions. And we talked about this before, Aaron, that I want to give the Chargers kind of a little, hats off here, just citing baseball here. I want to give them a little salute because they did what they needed to do. That is how you beat Patrick Mahomes. You pressure him. The edge rushers come in, you make him leave the pocket. Mahomes is the best improviser in the league, and they pressured him properly. The issue is their offense could not get it done. You make him make mistakes. He threw an interception that literally looked like a pop fly right to center field. So, again, the Chargers did what they needed to do, and I think that might be a format that at least I hope that teams start to use because, the Steelers have held Kansas City close at some point doing that. We may have not beat them, but we've held them close with that same strategy of the edge rushers making him leave the pocket, linebacker blitzes, all of that. So I hope for the long term that teams will start doing that. And hey, the Chargers still got one more matchup with them, so maybe they'll pull off the second one when it goes to Arrowhead.
And Mike, earlier in the show, you were talking about old Aaron Rodgers still hobbling out there on the field. Do you think the Jets can do anything respectable with their season after losing to the Broncos 10-9 today?
I mean, can they do anything respectable? Sure. Anything's possible for the New York Jets. But now the tough questions come into question. You've got Minnesota next week, a team that's 4-0. You've got Buffalo, who we're going to see tonight. I'm sure we'll talk about it before we leave. You've got Pittsburgh, New England, Houston, Arizona, and Indianapolis. They got to pick up wins along the ways. You got to think they got to pick up a win against Indianapolis, maybe Arizona, maybe New England. Maybe maybe we're talking they're 5-5 at week 10 potentially. I think it's possible. I also know as my dad is a Jets fan, he can't stand Aaron Rodgers. He hates this decision that the Jets made 2 years ago to have Rodgers be the quarterback, and especially he might have been right, especially after last year with the whole Achilles thing. Today, I don't know what happened. They couldn't run the ball, and Rodgers couldn't do anything to muster up that Rodgers magic that we're so used to seeing. I think it's possible, but there's questions coming out of the New York this week for sure.
And Chris, going into the season, it felt like the 49ers were a pretty high-tier candidate to make the NFC Championship. After a somewhat slow 2-2 start to the season, do you still view them in that same light?
I don't know about it. I mean, they need to win division games. They have a lot of hard games coming up. I mean, Arizona Arizona looked okay. They have Seattle, they have Kansas City, Dallas, Tampa, who look really good against Philly. I would not say that they're the favorite in the NFC. I can't even give you a favorite in the NFC at this point, to be honest, because San Francisco was my favorite in the NFC, but I'm concerned about them with all the injuries. Again, I think it's more of kind of a weird bridge year. This was the year that they thought they could finally push, break through the barrier and finally win the Super Bowl that they deserve. If I'm being honest, I'm sure you guys agree with that, with the quality of the team, but the injuries have kind of, stopped them and put a little stop in the road. And I think this is a bridge year for them. And I'm kind of wondering if they're going to end up with a low, maybe either not winning division or having a, bottom, like the last division winner, the lowest ranked.
And last question here, Mike. Minnesota still 4-0. Green Bay almost came back, putting up 22 in the fourth quarter. With Minnesota off to a 4-0 start, do you think that they're the clear favorites to win the NFC North and possibly the whole NFC?
Oh, that's a loaded question, Mr. Aaron over here. I think Sam Darnold, the Minnesota coaching deserves countless praise here for what they've been able to do the first 4 weeks of football. Shout out to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Shout out to Aaron Jones with a little revenge game today. I got a little scared, fellas. I'm down to my last pick in my survivor pool. My last pick went to Minnesota. I was the only guy to pick Minnesota against Green Bay. And when the Packers started coming back, the sweat started getting real thick down my neck. Thankfully, they were able to pull it out here. I think you got to give Minnesota a big, big, big eye for winning that division. I don't know about winning the whole NFC, but winning that division is a strong possibility. Let's just see what Detroit and Chicago can do. We know Chicago picked up a win today, and Detroit plays Monday against Seattle. So a lot of things in play for that division still.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to our Bills-Ravens preview, Buffalo has looked great to start the season, but despite their great start, Baltimore's still favored by 2.5 points going into tonight. We are slowly running out of time, not slowly, actually really quickly. So real quick, Mike, who do you think is going to win tonight? How close do you think the game's going to be?
I got Buffalo, and I think Buffalo's going to win by the skin of their teeth. I think it's going to be one of those games tonight. I'm going to say Buffalo wins by, let's go with 3. I'm going to say by a field goal.
A field goal. And Chris, same question to you.
I got Baltimore by probably about the same, 3-7. I think that they have a band. They're like the only team that's not a college team that has a band. And I think that crowd in Baltimore, it's a fun place. I've been there before, and it's a great place to watch a game. I may hate them, but we could use some help from them. But I got Baltimore, unfortunately, winning, much to my dismay.
I got to back Buffalo. To me, it feels insane that Baltimore's a favorite going into this game. Even though it's only 2.5 points, I feel like you got to give props to the Bills for how good they've been to start the season. I'm going to say Buffalo by a touchdown. I think it'll be a good game, but I just don't see Buffalo losing. I think they're too hot right now. And before we end the show, is there anything, Mike, that you want to say?
Oh, man, no, just thank you, Aaron, for having me on the Gridiron Address. Always fun to come and talk a little football and not wrestling. I do have the Nightcap this week on Boom Broadcasting, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I did drop a new episode here talking all of the crazy news that we saw in professional wrestling this past week on my YouTube, Mouthing Off with Mike. But much love, Aaron. Thanks for having me on the Gridiron Address. I was expecting you to wear a top hat. I hope to see the top hat one day in the future. We'll make that happen one day. Much love to you guys. Keep pushing the content. Make sure you subscribe to Boom Broadcasting. Watch the Gridiron Address here on Sundays, and watch Chris's Dugout Debrief here on Tuesdays. Correct? Is it Tuesdays? Yeah, Tuesdays.
Oh, Thursdays.
I don't know my days. Thursday at noon. So that's all I got.
And Chris, any words before we leave?
Yeah, again, same thing with Malik. Mike had to say thank you for having me on the show. I always love coming on. And yeah, Dugout Debrief this Thursday at noon. I'm going to have a guest. My dad will be on the show, a lifelong A's fan since the 70s. He liked him back when they were the Swinging A's. We had a really emotional last Thursday as we watched the game together, the final game at the Oakland Coliseum. So we're going to go discuss the Oakland A's, and we're going to go do a wild card preview. We have a doubleheader on Monday, which will determine who gets the last National League wild card spot. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk about baseball, and I'm really happy that I got to talk about football today. And subscribe to Boone Broadcasting, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks for having me on, man.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And that'll do it for week 4 of the Gridiron Address. Thanks to all you who watched, and hope everyone has a good rest of their night.
Bye, guys.